participating in the Well Nourished, Brighter Futures, which is a Let's Eat Healthy initiative. My name is Ashley Rosales. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist and the program director of nutrition science at Dairy Council of California. As a nutrition education organization, Dairy Council of California has empowered stakeholders, including educators, health professionals, and community leaders, to elevate the health of children and families through the pursuit of lifelong healthy eating habits for over 100 years. The purpose of the Well Nourished, Brighter Futures initiative is to invite experts from across disciplines to come together, like we're doing here today. And we want to really find those collaborative opportunities that lead to a future where all children are supported to grow healthy and also to reach their full potential. Really, with the numbers of priorities that are critical to child health really growing, their nutritional needs can be easily overlooked. And that can pose a risk for inadequate consumption of nutrient-dense foods during childhood and even beyond. So really working together is essential to help all children ensure that they have access to nutritious foods and also to the environments that support lifelong healthy eating habits where they live, learn, and play. So with your participation in the Well Nourished, Brighter Futures initiative, we hope to establish key principles that can address the unique nutritional needs of children across their critical life stages. So such as the first 1,000 days of life, in early childhood, and then also during their school age years. So we invite the sharing of promising opportunities to support children with proper growth and development while also preventing obesity and other chronic diseases, while also looking at building that foundation for learning and for lifelong success. So thank you for your time and for your expertise and collaboration so that we can help find solutions to ensure that all children, but especially those in vulnerable households, are well nourished and supported for a brighter future. I also want to take the time to thank you, Erin Price at the Glenn Price Group, for your support and collaboration in this initiative. I'm pleased to introduce Erin Price, President at Glenn Price Group.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Glenn Price Group, or GPG, just to briefly introduce us, we're a mission-driven consulting group, and we work with nonprofit organizations and with public agencies really to help them maximize impact, and often that is through supporting effective collaboration and partnerships. And at GPG, we're just really excited to be partnering with Dairy Council of California to support the Well Nourished, Brighter Futures initiative. And in particular, we look forward to working with a range of multidisciplinary cross-sector partners to establish some shared goals and to work together to make progress towards achieving those goals. And today's presentation, Dr. Shapiro, I think is really going to help provide a critical foundation of shared knowledge and insight for all of these partners in the initiative to come together around. So with that, Ashley, I'll turn it back over to you to introduce today's topic and Dr. Shapiro.
Great, thank you, Erin. So today we have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Nina Shapiro, a pediatric health expert who will provide important aspects for consideration in supporting childhood nutrition and in the opportunity to learn from her unique professional experiences. Dr. Nina Shapiro has been a pioneer in medicine for more than 2 decades as the director of ear, nose, and throat surgery at the Mattel Children's Hospital and as a professor at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. She is the author of 2 health books and 2 academic books. Her health book, Hype, A Doctor's Guide to Medical Myths, Exaggerated Claims, and Bad Advice, How to Tell What's Real and What's Not, was a Publishers Weekly Best Book of 2018. She has dedicated much of her work to setting the record straight when it comes to what's best for the health of oneself and for one's family. She has become a veteran of media work, building inquiries, and being featured in high-profile outlets such as Time Magazine, The Washington Post, The Wall Street Journal, NBC News, and CNN. So by the end of our dialogue today, we hope that you've been provided with some thought-provoking information and perspectives on how we can come together to address the unique nutritional needs of children while also supporting their optimal health and their well-being. Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Shapiro. I want to start by just kind of asking you a few questions and really looking forward to hearing your stories. So the first question I want to pose to you is, why do you feel nutrition is critical for achieving optimal health during various life stages, so such as pregnancy, early childhood, and school-age years?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to our conversation coming forward. So I think, there's several things we need to think about when we think about different stages of life for nutrition. And I think one way to reframe it is to not think about just that stage, but what that stage will be leading to. So the nutritional importance of pregnancy is obviously for the pregnant mother and for the child that she's carrying, but also for down the line. So if a mother who's pregnant is not having a healthy diet and is eating a lot of processed foods and a lot of what we call sort of nutrient weak foods that may be filling but not necessarily healthy for her, that will impact her pregnancy. It will impact her after pregnancy, and it will also impact her child while her child is being carried and also in infancy. So for instance, pregnant mothers who eat a lot of high sugar foods are more likely to develop something called gestational diabetes or diabetes of pregnancy and can continue to become diabetic. And it can also impact the health of their newborn. Their newborn can have issues with obesity and diabetes as well. So whatever is happening during a stage, so if we're talking about pregnancy, that impacts the mother after pregnancy, and then the child after the child is born, not just while the mother is pregnant with that child. And then that goes on in the newborn stages that, infants need to have good nutrition, not just for being healthy infants, but for being healthy older infants and toddlers and children. So I think a really important way to look at a different stage, whether it's pregnancy, infancy, or childhood, is not only that time, but how that's going to impact them in the years to come and even, into adulthood, because we're now seeing so many obese young children and young adults, and that's not just from the time they were adults. That started very, very early, and oftentimes before children are born. They're at risk for obesity depending on the mother's diet.
Thank you so much. Definitely reinforcing that intergenerational part of, why nutrition needs to start early and with the mom. Thank you for sharing that. And so from your perspective, what are maybe 1 to 2 successes or maybe even some achievements that we could look to in this area?
So I think prenatal nutrition is really important, and I think there has been a lot of success with that in educating pregnant mothers as far as what is nutrient rich, what is good to eat in their diet, what is safe to eat. There's been a lot of concerns about certain foods that can trigger allergies later on in their children, and what we're finding now is that certain foods, so for instance, peanut products, dairy products, which were considered several years ago potentially going to trigger allergies in their infants, it's found that it's actually the complete opposite. And that if a pregnant mother is eating such products, dairy products, peanut products, nut products during pregnancy, there's actually less likelihood that their child will develop allergies to these foods. So I think that's been a really good, important development. And I think really for educating moms to understand that, when you're pregnant, you need to be eating well. That doesn't necessarily, that notion of eating for 2 has sort of gone by the wayside. You don't have to eat double, but you have to sort of pack in your nutritional quality. So it doesn't matter how many calories you're eating, it matters what's in those calories. I think that, I think people are finally learning that there is such a thing as good food, healthy food versus, sort of nutrient empty, empty calorie kind of food. And I think that has really improved over the last several years. And I think the same thing has improved for children. I think children are also learning that, we always use this term junk food, but it's sort of, it has obviously clearly a negative connotation, but there are plenty of other foods that are supposedly healthy foods that are not necessarily healthy foods. And I think children are also learning that just because something is, has a certain word in it, like juice, or made with fruit, it's not necessarily a healthy food. And then lastly, I think that it's really good that people are starting to think about beverages as part of their diet. It's not like there's food and there's drink.
Right.
There's food and drink are really part of the diet. And I think it's really important to think of those as a union, really. And that when you're thinking about what you're drinking, that's part of your diet. And I think in the past, people would put that a little bit separately. And I think now that they're joined, I think that's making people think about not only what they're eating, but what they're drinking.
Yeah, thank you for that. I definitely feel like there's been a shift in focus on healthy beverage patterns as a part of that total diet and that total eating approach that a family and a child especially is taking, and the focus on quality of the foods, as you mentioned, and quality of the beverage to ensure that those nutrient dense foods, those wholesome foods, are consumed more often is I think a really great point that you bring up. So based on your professional experience as a doctor and a surgeon, obviously you work with children and their families every single day. What are some of the key issues that you see impacting child nutrition and also their overall health?
So I think, children are very savvy these days. They're much savvier than we were. And, but they are, they're still children, and they're going to be very susceptible to marketing. And, a lot of the quote unquote healthy foods, which are really unhealthy, are being marketed to young children and teens. And I think that, that's a really important issue. And now, again, talking about beverages, there are so many more options than there were even 5-10 years ago. And a lot of their intake is going to be these beverages. So for instance, the young children are drinking a lot of juice products, which are, juice drinks, which are really just sugar water with a little bit of coloring in them and maybe a drop of actual juice or fruit in them. And, they think they're eating something healthy, and their parents think they're giving them something healthy. And I think, that's a really big issue that we're seeing, is to really reframe what is truly healthy and what is just a little bit of a marketing twist
right.
on what they think that they're eating.
So then what would you look at as some wholesome, maybe under-consumed beverages or foods that you see children aren't getting enough of?
Right. So I think, once a child is past infancy, there are really only two things that are considered healthy beverages. And again, when we think of beverages, I like to think of them as part of the diet. So it's water and milk. It's very simple. And then everything else is either completely unhealthy or should be had in extreme moderation. So really the only other drink that children should consider would be 100% juice. So, if it's 100% squeezed orange juice or 100% apple juice, a tiny amount, meaning like 4 to 8 ounces per day at the most. That's not even a recommendation. That's at the maximum to have that. Everything else should be considered a treat, just like they're going out to get a candy bar. It's really that level of lack of healthfulness. I think that, for hydration, water, and I'm a big proponent of tap water. They should, have tap water for hydration, and milk, regular dairy cow milk, unless there's a severe allergy, which is extremely rare. A lot of people think they have some dairy issues, but it's really not. So, I think that most people are not allergic to dairy, and it is the best, healthiest, sort of nutrient dense liquid. And it's actually, the nice thing about it is it's a liquid. It's 87% water. So it's very hydrating, but it's also a food because it has a lot of nutritional quality to it, as opposed to juice, which has quite minimal nutritional benefit.
Thank you. I think that makes it a great point where you're saying, milk is a high quality food, and really to get the benefits of the nutrition from fruits, you're going to encourage those children to have the whole form of the fruit, right? Whereas the juice really doesn't give them that overall quality of why they eat fruit. So I think that's a really good, important part to remember. Thank you for that. So what do you suggest are, some of the top or maybe most important priorities for collaborative action? So really looking at how can we come together to support child nutrition needs for their growth, for their development, and also for that academic success.
I think that a lot of it just comes down to education. And I think that a lot of people think that they're having a lot of healthful things in their diets purely by what it says on the front of a label, of a nutritional label. And again, that's really just the marketing part. The back part of any label of any sort of food product is what is in it, not the front part that's really just the advertisement. So I think it is a matter of education, and a lot of the education is very accessible for families to understand once they really understand what are some of the downsides of some of the foods that they're eating and giving to their children, and also what are the upsides for the other foods that are perhaps not given as frequently in their diet. So for instance, you were talking about whole fruit. Really the main benefit of whole fruits or whole vegetables is the fiber. And once you juice anything down, even if it's 100% juice, you're removing the main benefit of those products. So I think most people don't necessarily understand that. And it's a very simple idea. You don't need to eat 30 oranges in a glass of orange juice. You can have one with the fiber and get much more nutritional benefit from that. So I think it's really, for people to understand where the quality is, what is in certain foods. I think the education to understand what's the difference between a protein and a vitamin and a mineral and fat content and carbohydrate. These are basic things that adults can learn, that children can learn. And I think once they understand what they're putting into their bodies and when they're drinking something or eating something, what they're really getting, what the benefit of it is, and what it's doing to them or doing for them, I think that will really be the way to go for people to understand.
Great. So focus on collaborative support around education of families, education of children. That's a really great thing to remember. So kind of looking at this discussion and talking about child health, some of the issues we've talked about maybe some promising opportunities and areas that we can come together collectively to support child health. Do you have 1 to 2, final thoughts around key recommendations moving forward that you think would really help ensure children are supported to grow healthfully?
I think one of the main things that we need to focus on is education for children, education for parents, and I think even education for caregivers and teachers who are providing nutrition for kids. So many kids are getting breakfast at school, lunch at school, and I think all of the great food programs that are offered in schools, and hopefully we will be all back in schools at some point in the future. People rely on a lot of their nutrition at school, and I think to understand, to get some education very early on these very basic issues. Here there are 2 drinks that your child should have for nutrition. It's very simple: milk and water. That's it. Here are the foods that are healthy for them, and here's why. I think that people can really understand. I mean, you can explain to a 5-year-old that a piece of candy, it has no nutritional value, and it has sugar, and here's what sugar does. Something like water is good for your hydration. Something like milk has protein, calcium, vitamin D, vitamin A, good calories that will last long. There's the growing food notion. A lot of people use that term. Here's the food that's going to help you grow and help you learn, and here's the food that won't. And to consider foods and beverages together in that, I think will help people understand what they're putting into their body and how it can impact them later on.
Thank you. That's a great point, because you mentioned the need for education, not just for the parents, the family, and the children, but also those that influence the environment that allow us to have access to the nutritious food. So you mentioned educators, those that are serving on the front lines of really critical meal and nutrition assistance programs. So school meals, you mentioned. I mean, that's such an incredible safety net of nutrition for these families. Programs like WIC, Women, Infant, Children. So I think extending that connectivity and that education to work with those that are, as you mentioned, on the front lines of education and food access, while also supporting the families and the children themselves with education, is a really, really great point. And I think one that we can all look to build moving forward. So thank you. I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Shapiro, for taking the time to be with us today, sharing your unique expertise, again, for all the work you do to, help children and their families improve their health. You're doing this every day through your work. So thank you, but also for helping us launch the Well Nourished Brighter Futures initiative. And I want to thank Aaron Price for working with us as well to support us in building brighter and healthier futures for all children. So with that, I'll turn it back to Aaron.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. And thank you, Dr. Shapiro, for a great presentation, very informative and thought-provoking. I think just a couple of takeaways just from me personally. I think this kind of downstream impact of nutrition, and even starting prenatally and thinking about how nutrition in those phases or those stages kind of manifests in later stages of life. And certainly, as Ashley was just picking up on as well, kind of this importance of education and nutrition education, and framing up some clear and simple messages that can be conveyed throughout the population, and being able to do that through a collaborative and cross-sector effort, which I think is very central to this initiative. So with that, just want to echo that thanks for your presentation today, Dr. Shapiro, and thank you as well, Ashley, and the Dairy Council of California for your leadership on this important initiative.
Thank you both.